cats, humanity's favourite feline friend. Cute, cuddly, and most of all, deadly. Did you know that cats are responsible for the deaths of between 6.3 billion to 22.3 billion mammals annually just in the US? My name's Tanjar, and it's my goal today to weaponize these murderous balls of rage in Path of Exile's Return of the Ancients event. Now, what lies ahead is an absolute powerhouse of a build, but it is certainly not a good league starter. It requires a ton of expensive uniques to even function properly, so for me to get to this, cats go brrrr, I'm gonna have to go through this. I don't think the boss even knows I'm here. So, grab a drink and some snacks, and enjoy the journey. We begin progressing through the campaign, using Essence Drain, Contagion, and Blight as our choice of skills. Essence Drain fires out a projectile that puts a heavy damage over time effect on the enemy and also heals me, which I can then spread to nearby enemies by using Contagion. Once all the nearby enemies are affected, I can just hold down Blight to do some extra damage and pick off any survivors. And since Contagion keeps chaining when enemies die, it means big packs can easily be cleared out with just a single use of this combo. We choose to simp for a Lyra during the Bandit quest for the plus 15% to all of our elemental resistances, and then continue on to Act 3 where we're offered the Soulrend skill gem. Soulrend is kinda like Essence Drain, except its damage over time effect isn't quite as strong, although it's much shorter. It does, however, seek out enemies and infinitely pierce, making it amazing for clear speed. But most importantly, we can use a microtransaction to change the projectiles into cats. Look at them, the MCX is a work of art. Speaking of works of art, you may have noticed that the thumbnail for this video is of far higher quality than my normal thumbnails. That's because it's the work of the incredible artist Alan Draws. Alan does commissioned work, specialising in medieval fantasy, anime and cartoons, and does an insane job of it. I highly suggest you check him out. I've left a link to his Twitter as well as his Discord tag in the description below. So, Soulrend. This is going to be the core ability that we use in this build. We may only be firing 3 cats per second right now, but by the end of this video, I intend for the entire screen to be getting deleted by a horde of feline fury. We eventually remember to put on our iconic MTX, and then we surf our way towards the Lord's Labyrinth, where we fight our way through multiple floors of traps and enemies until we're able to choose one of the Freesia class ascendancies specific to events. We're choosing to spec into the Bog Shaman Ascendancy. Our first Ascendancy points will be going into the Sanguine Power node. This removes all of our energy shield, but turns all the energy shield in our gear into flat life, at the cost of -3 max life per level. This is pretty much what the Apostate body armor does, but the advantage here is that we free up the body armor slot, which is by far the most valuable slot when stacking energy shield. You can get over 1300 energy shield on a good endgame body armor, which means 1300 flat life. You can't get those numbers wearing the Apostate. At this point, we're just using Soulrend to clear, linked with Void Manipulation, Controlled Destruction, and Greater Multiple Projectiles. We're also still using Essence Drain just for single target fights, and the Despair Curse just to speed those fights up a bit. I could buy a Mark of Submission ring and put my Despair gem in there to curse everything I hit with Despair, but it's so soon after a league start, and trying to buy something like that so early is a ballsy move. We continue our work through the campaign. Soulrend clears incredibly well. It's actually surprising how well it clears in fact. One click and half the enemies on your screen are dead. But I am falling behind in both single target damage and survivability. Soulrend does very little single target damage and Essence Drain isn't exactly great. And since I'm using a ton of energy shield gear because of my ascendancy, I have no armor or evasion to mitigate any damage, so enemies are just chunking me with every hit. I've grabbed a little bit of mana reservation efficiency, which will allow me to use 2 auras that reserve 50% of my mana at a time, while still having some mana left over to cast. I'm going to be using Malevolence for some more damage, and Determination to try and help out with my tankiness a little. These are just a temporary solution for the campaign. We clear out both the Cruel Lab and the Merciless Lab, picking up the Pandemic Ascendancy for more damage, and Toe Pack for more projectile speed so that my cats fly faster. And with the lab handled, we can head over to Katava, kill him off, save the world, and finish off the campaign. Now that the campaign's done, we want to buy a couple of upgrades before we get stuck into maps. We have just 10 chaos from random drops, so let's invest that into 2 rings and a belt that can make up for all the resistances we're losing from finishing the campaign and from our toe packed ascendancy. We get into the maps, start blasting, and on our 5th map we get a divine drop. And then on our 6th map we get another divine drop. For fuck's sake, Mark. I guess we should spend some of this money. I'll buy a 6-link file regalia and hit it with a few deafening essences of woe for a decent energy shield roll. Then I'll roll some green sockets on it and socket in our new Soulrend gem setup. I'll also buy a higher rolled Cane of Unraveling just to help out with my damage a little bit. I have plenty of money left over, but I want to keep mapping for now just to get some XP so that I can buy items when I'm a higher level and can use higher item bases. Okay, I'm in T4 maps and I've had 3 divine drops. With every video I make, I become more of a believer in the streamer client. And another one in T9 maps. If you click off this video, it's okay, I understand, I'd be pretty mad too. I continue working through the map tiers until I eventually hit level 84, meaning I can now equip the best energy shield bases in the game, so it's time to spend all that money I absolutely earned, don't question it. I'll buy a pair of eye level 86 Warlock boots, and hit them with a few deafening essences of woe until I get a nice energy shield roll with space for movement speed. Okay, well I hit 35% move speed with tons of res, that'll do me just fine. Next, I'll buy a Screams of the Desiccated belt with the Replenishing Shrine roll to help with the life cost from Pandemic, as well as some future life costs that we're going to have to face. Then we'll grab an amulet with +1 chaos gems, some res, and some energy shield, as well as a pair of Dodre's Tanjar, corrupted with max life and despair on hit. And finally, a Malachi Similar helmet to give us the Blood Magic Keystone passive. This leaves us with a far heavier life-based build. We're stacking life through energy shield gear and then spending it on our spells. And after some mapping, we're also able to afford a Dissolution of the Flesh. This removes all of our energy shield, which is already the case because of our ascendancy, and in exchange, we reserve life when we're hit instead of taking the damage directly. We also get a ton more life from it. This is an incredibly powerful jewel for what we're doing, because it allows us to pick up the Eternal Youth Keystone passive. This passive gives us 50% less life regen and leech rate, but it makes our energy shield recharge apply to our health instead. So, why is this such a powerful combo? Well, it essentially splits my health bar into 2 sections. The red part of my health bar kind of works as my mana, since this is what I'm spending on my skills. But when I take damage, it now reserves my life from the total max life pool. The reason this is so powerful is that this reservation mechanic isn't considered damage that interrupts my life recharge. So I can constantly be sacrificing my life for more damage and recharging it while still getting hit. There are some major downsides, however. Damage over time effects will still cancel out the recharge effect, so we need to become immune to bleed, ignite, and poison. Bleed and ignite aren't too difficult. They can both be fully countered with tattoos and auras. So what about poison? Well, I have a plan for this, but you'll find out about that a little bit later on. So let's put some numbers on this to help with perspective. Previously, we had around 800 life regen per second, and that's with a level 20 Vitality Aura and the Replenishing Shrine belt. But now, with this setup, we effectively have around 3000 life regen per second. And in a build where the more life I sacrifice, the more damage I do, that makes a huge difference. All of this has also freed up some space for us to make changes in how we do things. Previously, we were self-casting our Soulrend, but now we're going to be using a cast while channeling setup so that we can spin around the map with Cyclone, firing out cats along the way. This results in way more keys being fired per second. Now, let's quickly talk about Soulrend itself, because we have the options of Soulrend, Soulrend of the Spiral, and Soulrend of Reaping to choose from. Each of these gems has certain properties that can help us out, but we're looking for very specific things in this build. First of all, we want a lot of projectiles. Soulrend and Soulrend of the Reaping fire a single projectile, whereas Soulrend of the Spiral fires 5 projectiles, so that's a win for Spiral. Second of all, we want our projectiles to pierce. Reaping doesn't pierce at all, but normal Soulrend and Soulrend of the Spiral both pierce infinitely, which is extremely powerful, so they're both winning in that regard. Next up, we want to be able to shotgun enemies. This simply means that if I fire 10 projectiles at an enemy, the enemy can get hit by all 10 at once, instead of just one of them. It's very common for skills to not be able to shotgun in PoE, so it's important for us to check. Soulrend can't shotgun, but Soulrend of the Spiral and Reaping both can. So, from our graphic here, you can see there's one obvious choice. Soulrend of the Spiral inherently fires 5 projectiles, saving me having to waste the support gem on greater multiple projectiles. It also infinitely pierces enemies, which is just an incredibly powerful mechanic. And lastly, it can also shotgun enemies, which should make rares and bosses way easier for us. Oh, and did I mention that Soulrend projectiles are heat-seeking missiles? They naturally turn towards enemies to hit them as they travel. So we're kinda running the build as we want it now, but we're still facing the issue that our damage is really low. See, I planned out an endgame build, but I forgot how terrible chaos skills are early on. Maybe I should have spent more time planning this stage of the build and less time planning the final stages. The main issue is that chaos skills get little to no support on the passive tree compared to most other skills, so you're pretty much just forced into rushing into some cluster jewels just to even make your damage respectable. I could do that, but I'm only 1 or 2 items away from a big damage boost, so it feels wasteful to spend multiple divines on a good cluster jewel when I'm just gonna sell it again in a few hours. And we always have blighted maps here to help us farm up the cash when we need that help in hand. So with that, we have enough to buy our next major upgrade, the Wrathpith Globe. This shield gives us 5% spell crit chance and 5% spell damage per 100 life, so it's absolutely perfect for our life stacking build. The downside is that we sacrifice 10% of our life whenever we trigger a skill. We have enough life recovery to survive this now, but if we want to trigger more cats, we're going to need a lot more recovery. Since we're using the shield now, I need a weapon in my main hand, so I've equipped a rune dagger with +1 to chaos skills and some spell crit with crafted spell damage. We could also now swap out our support gem setup to go for a more hit-based damage build, rather than focusing on damage over time. Then let's make a bit of a swap on our passive tree. I can now spec into the Pain Attunement Keystone, which gives 30% more spell damage when on low life. But I'm not on low life, you say? Well, we can fix that by using the Petrified Blood spell. This spell pretty much just locks us to low life. The only way we'll be able to go above low life is by using a life flask. It also has a really powerful interaction with our Dissolution of the Flesh. Normally when you use this, you get locked to low life and it's as simple as that. But as mentioned earlier, with Dissolution of the Flesh, our health has kind of been split in two, and now damage taken from enemies will reserve health, even from the empty upper half. Basically, when we use Petrified Blood with Dissolution of the Flesh, it allows us to have access to our full life pool, despite us being on low life. We'll socket this into an Essence Worm since we don't want it reserving any of our life thanks to blood magic. Finally, now that we're recharging our health so effectively, life regens become pretty weak. This means that we can drop the Vitality Aura and swap out the replenishing Shrine Roll on the Screams of the Desiccated Belt to a massive Shrine Roll for more max life. We're actually now functioning pretty well as a build. We're able to move and clear through high tier maps really well when we're super tanky. The only real issue now is our single target damage, but this was always going to be a problem. This is an endgame build that I'm trying to make work as a league starter, so we knew from the start how awkward this period was going to be for us. Luckily, the hardest part is past us with getting the build to actually function, and now we just need to spend some time focusing on upgrading all of our gear pieces out of day 1 and 2 items, and into some more respectable equipment. One easy example of this is a high rolled Maraline's Fallacy. This gives us a ton of crit multi, and even though the crit chance loss hurts, it's still a huge upgrade. And after we've leveled up a bit further, we pick up blood magic on the tree, so that we can swap out our Malachi's Simula helmet into a high energy shield helmet with resistances and energy shield recharge rate. This energy shield recharge rate is going to be the main way that we scale our health regen, since this directly transfers to the rate that our health recharges thanks to Eternal Youth. So, we'll buy a good energy shield helmet base with fractured T1 energy shield recharge rate, and hit it with deafening essences of woe until we get some good energy shield with high resistances. And with that, I think we're ready for the next major milestone of the build, the Uber Lab. We have to be a little bit careful in the Uber Lab, since our life recharge is disabled by a lot of the traps in here. Slow and careful is the name of the game. Luckily, I'm no stranger to being extremely careful in the labyrinth. So after some nimble navigation of the lab floors, we take down a Zoro for our last ascendancy points. But we're not going to be using these points right now. Instead, we're going to be buying an audience with the King. Once we've taken down the King in the Mists, we can pick up the Nameless Bloodline Ascendancy, which allows us to become unaffected by poison, which, as we mentioned earlier, can destroy our recharge. This comes at the cost of disabling our utility flasks, which doesn't really matter because our belt disables our flasks anyway. But this is just the path to pick up one additional ring slot. We're going to be using another unique ring later on in the build, so this is going to be a huge benefit. But now though, we can just use this extra slot for some extra resistances and energy shield. Back into the maps, and again we're actually starting to get somewhere now. Rares are dying and our map clear is pretty damn good. We're still only about 2% of the damage we want to end up at, so there's still a long road ahead of us, but the build's finally got some legs. I cleared up the Eater of Worlds and the Searing Exarch, then knocked out the Maven Tenway and a T17 map, unlocking my 4th and 5th fragment slots in the Atlas. This means I can now support my maps with 5 scarabs, and therefore can start doing some kind of map strategy to make some real money. I tried to think of a farm that would be really profitable, fairly quick, and would suit my build really well. I decided to do some stacked deck farming. The strat is simple: spec into a bunch of pack size as well as ritual, and then use 5 divination scarabs of the cloister to fill up your map with a ton of enemies to drop stacked decks. The pack size will make these packs bigger, and with ritual I can fight some of those packs multiple times. The reason my build is so good at this farm is because these mobs all have proximity shields and do quite a lot of damage. For many builds, this is a huge problem, but I'm quite tanky, and one of the quirks of Soulrend that I didn't mention earlier is that it damages enemies through proximity shields, so it's a perfect ability for a farm like this. 3 Cloister Scarabs only costs about a chaos right now, so this is costing me around 2 to 3 chaos total per map to run, and I'm getting between 60 to 100 stacked decks per map in return, depending on RNG with Rituals and Mirage. Plus we also get the added RNG fun of Ritual rewards. You never know what you might find in these things. A fashionable belt, perhaps? We're pretty quickly able to afford a Diamond Shrine Screams of a Desiccated belt. This guarantees that all of our damage will crit, making for a huge damage upgrade. Then we can buy a pair of eye level 85 Warlock gloves and spam Deafening Essences of Greed until we've got some good energy shield prefixes. Holy, that's literally a perfect roll. I'll craft prefixes cannot be changed, and harvest Reforger Defense mod to guarantee energy shield recharge rate. Then we'll block decks as it's the highest weighted mod that we don't want, and then slam, hoping for some res. And we hit in. That's not great for us, but we can always do this again later. We'll craft Fire Res as our final mod, and use Eldritch Currency to roll Unnerve and Chaos Damage Lucis Life. And that's the gloves done. Our next focus is going to be on imbuing level 20 Cyclone Gems with Coins of Power until one is supported by level 1 Life Tap. Life Tap makes all supported skills cost life instead of mana, so having this would allow me to spec out of blood magic and equip some auras to give me a bit of extra juice. Oof, we're about 20 attempts in now with no luck sadly. At least inspiration sells for a divine or two. Another 11 goes, let's try again. Well, we got a few that might sell for some of our money back, but still no life tap sadly. And the last 14 tries for now. Come on, let's get this upgrade sorted. Hey, there we go. This means we can free up our mana once again. Let's unspec blood magic and put in an aura setup with a level 3 enlighten. With this change, I can do something else that will massively increase the amount of damage that I do, and the amount of cats that I'm firing. We'll buy an Imperial Skein with fractured +1 to chaos spell skills. We need it to be an Imperial Skein because it's the highest attack speed base for caster daggers. We can then spam Deafening Essences of Woe, again, until we hit high attack speed with an open prefix. Okay, that's good. Can I annul off the mana? Sadly not. Let's keep going. Oh, not for long it seems. Willcraft hits can't be evaded so that we can have a 100% hit rate without needing to invest into any accuracy. And then slam on a final suffix. God damn it, Dex. And that's our weapon done. So why did I need this high attack speed, can't miss type of dagger? Well, that's because we're swapping out of cast while channeling and swapping into cast on crit. We crit with every one of our hits thanks to our belt, and now we have a high attack speed dagger that can never miss. So why is this better than cast while channeling? Well, cast when channeling can trigger around 2.8 times per second, a respectable amount of keys. Cast on crit can get way bigger numbers. Just by equipping this dagger, I'm triggering almost 6 times per second, over double the previous amount. And this number can go even higher with just a small amount of cooldown recovery and some more attack speed. There's very specific breakpoints that you can reach with how many times you can trigger cast on crit. Without any cooldown, you can trigger a maximum of 6.06 times per second. Then, if you invest into a little bit of cooldown, you can get up to 7.58 triggers per second. And if you really invest into cooldown, you can trigger cast on crit up to 10.1 times per second. This does require a lot of investment to do though. For this build, we're going to end up aiming for the 7.58 breakpoint, since we sacrifice our health with the Sacrifice Support Gem and the Rathbith Globe. And the more cats I fire, the more I have to invest into my life recharge, which is going to get harder and harder the deeper I go into it. I have enough money left over to quality up my Maraline's Fallacy with crit quality, and I'll be using a Death Rush ring now to replace my Essence Worm, now that I don't need my Petrified Blood to have no reservation cost. We can also try to use Forbidden Tattoos of the Duelist. These will reroll one of my Ascendancies to a random Duelist one. We want the Lucky Block Ascendancy from the Gladiator, and we can replace Fel Fen as it locks nearby enemies' Chaos Res to 0, meaning I can't curse them with Despair to lower their Chaos Res below 0. No luck on the first one. We'll try one more since these are 350 Chaos each. Okay, this isn't too bad. This gives a ton of AoE, which helps our Cyclone hit more enemies. Like I said though, these are 350 Chaos each, so we'll slowly keep working away at this. I wanted to swap my map strat out for something a little bit more profitable. I tried out clicking strong boxes for scarabs, but the prices are kinda messed up because it's an event, so it's actually not that profitable right now. I also tried out some Tota and actually made a solid amount of money from a few hours here. But since I'm doing this in a PoE event, there's not many players and the market's kinda messed up. People aren't really buying many items and a lot of the normal strats aren't as profitable as they should normally be. I just decided to go back to farming stacked decks, but instead of selling them for an okay profit, I'm going to start opening them for the chance at jackpot divination cards. The logic here was that because most common items are really cheap right now, but most endgame items are really expensive, hitting the jackpot cards that reward these items would be way more valuable than send the stacked decks for 1C each. With some of the profits, we can finally upgrade our body armor. We'll buy an eye level 86 Twilight Regalia with fractured 100% energy shield. Then, say it with me everyone, we spam deafening essences of woe. We're looking for T1% hybrid to get the highest amount of energy shield possible. There we go, we got it on the last essence of the batch. Now we can put an Eater of Worlds mod on the chest so that the Eater of Worlds is dominant, as there's no Searing Exarch mods on the chest, and then use an Eldritch Chaos Orb to re-roll the suffixes until I get really high resistance. That is definitely some really high resistance, we'll take that gladly. Let's craft some fire res on there, and then roll Eldritch Currency to hit high Zealotry effect and crit multi with spells. Then we just need to 6-link it, colour it with 3 green sockets, and it's done. Back in the maps now, and we're starting to have some issues with sustaining our life, so let's fix that with the profit that we're making here. First, we'll spec into this armor energy shield node here and grab the mastery that gives us 20% of all percentage increases to armor as energy shield recharge. This means that we can just find some easy sources of percent armor to get a ton of extra energy shield recharge, or for us, life recharge. Next, we can buy some boots with decent energy shield and tier 1 energy shield recharge rate, and then try to annul them to get them into a position where I can craft move speed on them and slam a suffix with a Crusader Orb for a chance of cooldown recovery. Okay, let's pray for the 1 in 4 chance of cooldown recovery. Well, let's keep doing this on boots until we hit it. Finally we got it. That took 8 attempts to hit. We just had to keep gambling boots of Faustus because there was nothing on the market to even work with. Crafting this event is getting really difficult with the lack of items and resources to work with here. I'll keep crafting the move speed onslaught mod until they're a higher roll, and then these aren't pretty, but they'll work. The onslaught's going to increase my attack speed, helping me trigger more cats per second, and the 14% cooldown means that I have hit the first breakpoint that I mentioned earlier, and now have the potential to fire up to 7.57 cats per second. The energy shield recharge rate also gives me roughly 1.8 thousand extra life recharge per second with my current life pool. I'm still re-rolling my Ascendancy, and I'm about 20 tattoo re-rolls in now, and I've still got no lucky block. Hopefully we see it soon because this is very expensive. We can always just head back to the div card farming though. This isn't the greatest farm, but honestly, it's getting harder and harder each day to make money in this event, and at least this is consistent. And after a day or two of consistent card drops, but no big ticket card drops, which I'm definitely not salty about, we have enough money to make some more upgrades. We really need to sort out our rings. Right now they're just giving me a small amount of life and energy shield with some res, but we can do a lot better than that. We'll buy this manifold ring with huge life and crit multi. This ring has had a reflecting mist used on it, which doubles some affixes and turns others negative. The crit multi and life are doubled, but the rarity and channeling skills are now both doing the opposite of what they normally do. Luckily, neither of these are really downsides for what I'm doing, so this is perfect for me. I can then buy a Calandra's touch ring. This will act as an exact copy of the ring I just bought, since there's no other good options on the market and it's not really worth the price to just craft one myself. And lastly, we'll buy a Nimbus. This ring makes all of my projectiles fire randomly around me, which kinda already happens with Soulrend of the Spiral, but it also makes my projectiles return to me. Until now, I've been using the returning projectile support to make this happen. The issue with this support though is that it makes all my projectiles do only 1/3 of the damage on their way back. Nimbus will allow my cats to do their full damage. Plus, I can now drop that support gem and add one that actually increases my damage rather than just giving me some utility. So I'll swap it out for a void manipulation support. I can then also finally hit the lucky block ascendancy. I've been rolling these over the last few days and this took 34 attempts to hit. That's around 75 divines worth of tattoos. I also fixed my glove craft from earlier by doing another prefix that can't be changed in defense reforge, blocking dex and int, and then slamming, and then just crafting on some reds to finish them off. Oh, and I did fix the implicits after, don't worry. Our helmet's also looking pretty dire. Let's buy a Lich's Circlet with Fractured Max Rolled Energy Shield Recharge Rate, since this is the best energy shield base you can get. We can then keep reforging with a defense mod until we get huge energy shield. We're doing this method now since Blue Harvest Juice is so cheap. Okay, slam 3S on life. Holy, that's a big energy shield helmet. We can make the Eater of Worlds dominant and use an Eldritch Chaos Orb to reroll the suffixes. And that's T1 Fire Res, literally perfect. Let's craft on some more res for the final mod, and then roll the spare curse effect and energy shield recharge rate for our Eldritch Implicits. And that's some sexy fucking headwear finished. After all those gear changes, we're ridiculously strong in comparison to before. We melt most enemies and can barely get hit thanks to the lucky block. And because of that, we've decided to change up our map strat one last time. We're doing Breach as a way to farm up raw currency. This is one of the most profitable map strategies right now, and it's just a ton of fun. So it's long overdue that we dip our toes, or our paws, into it. I hate that I said that. And honestly, the build is finally at that point where it just feels broken. I genuinely don't even notice enemies hitting me from how tanky I am, and everything just kinda dies. Sometimes when I'm clearing out the outer area of a breach, the breach just randomly ends from where I've killed the final rares of the breach from off screen by accident. Like, just look at how fast Rune dies, and we're still missing some massive upgrades. The only issue I'm having right now is the lag from doing a farm this juicy. With so many enemies on the screen getting hit, the game really struggles to keep up, so I need to come up with a way to have a huge amount of enemies die faster. The best way I can achieve this is with explosions, so with the profits from farming Breach for a few hours, I'll buy an 8 passive large chaos cluster jewel with Unspeakable Gifts, Touch of Cruelty, and Overwhelming Malice. Unspeakable Gifts gives us a 10% chance to make enemies explode, giving us a ton of extra clear speed. Touch of Cruelty means that we can hinder enemies, which slows them down, but it also means that those enemies take 10% increased chaos damage. Now this is actually huge, because whenever something in PoE reads that the enemy takes increased damage, that actually means that it's a multiplier to your damage, not additive. What I mean by this is if you have 1000% increased damage, and you get 10% increased damage, it becomes 1010. But if the enemy takes 10% increased damage, it essentially becomes 1100. This is also why items that say more damage are far better than ones that say increased damage, because it works the same way. More multiplies your damage, increased just adds on to it. And lastly on the cluster jewel, Overwhelming Malice gives me a 10% chance for Unholy Might on crit, so pretty much always since I'm hitting around 50 times per second minimum and critting every time. Unholy Might gives me a 25% chance to inflict Withered on enemies, which increases the amount of chaos damage that enemies take by 6% per stack, stacking up to 15 times. This works the exact same as how I just mentioned. The text reads that it increases the damage that enemies take by 6% per stack, so at 15 stacks, enemies are taking 90% increased damage. This is the reason that every chaos damage build wants Wither. It practically doubles your damage. Now, we don't really have any points to spec into this cluster jewel, so I'm going to have to rework my passive tree a bit. I'm going to spec out of Pain Attunement for now, which is a huge damage loss, but we can get it back later on with some clever trickery exclusive to this event. I can also rework this little section at the start to save some points. So now we have enough points to slot our new cluster jewel in and take all 3 passives. We also have 2 jewel sockets available now, which we're going to be using very soon, but first, we have a bigger problem on our hands. All of our attributes are in shambles. Luckily, there's an easy fix for this, and it's one of my favourite items in the game. If you're a regular here, then you probably know what I'm talking about. The Elegant Hubris Timeless Jewel, of course. If you get one of these that's commemorated to Caspero, it will change any keystone passives nearby in your passive tree to Supreme Ostentation. This allows you to ignore all attribute requirements. However, you also gain no bonuses from attributes. This is the reason I wasn't too excited during the earlier crafting sessions when I slammed Dexon in. I knew they'd end up being worthless. So, I'll slot that in here next to the Mind Over Matter keystone, and then take the Supreme Ostentation keystone. Problem solved. But there's an extra layer to this. Elegant Hubris turns all of the small passives in its area blank, and all of the major passives into a variety of enormous stats. You may remember that I'm now using percent armor as a way to scale my life recharge rate. Well, this particular Elegant Hubris roll has a lot of percent armor, but that's going to cost a lot of passive points. Luckily, there's no problem you can't solve by throwing more money at it. So let's go get some more money. This jewel upgrade feels amazing. The explosions are really noticeable, although you probably don't notice anything since this strat is such an absolute mess of enemies constantly, but it's really noticeable for me. Bear in mind, I just dropped Pain Attunement, so I lost 30% more damage, and I'm still tearing through one of the juiciest and most endgame strategies available. Not just any build can walk in here and do this, as you can probably imagine. So after a little while longer of farming breaches, we can afford to buy an impossible escape jewel with the mind over matter role. We can then slot that into our passive tree. This allows us to pick up passives within a small radius of what used to be the mind over matter keystone without having to path to them, so I can grab the armor nodes for way less investment. I can also use my remaining money to replace all of my leftover small attribute passives on my tree with Honor Tattoos of the Oak, each giving me 2% increased maximum life, and then use Tailoring Orbs to increase the effect of defensive mods on my body armor, which I forgot to do earlier. I also then need to 6-link it again because the Tailoring Orb messed up all the sockets. And now we can head back to the breaches for one final round of currency farming. We only have 2 more upgrades to buy, and after that we can put this build into some final tests. Although we're already clearing out fully juiced 100% delirious breaches, so I'm pretty sure we're already proving ourselves, but a few extra tests don't hurt. We introduce some hiveborn abominations to some cats, farm some tinks, and after we've farmed up enough of those tinks, we're able to buy a Forbidden Flame and Flesh jewel with the Shaper of Storms role. This will give us the Shaper of Storms ascendancy from the Elementalist, meaning that all of our chaos damage can, and always will, shock enemies, giving us a huge damage boost. I'll slot these into the 2 jewel sockets in the cluster jewel that I bought earlier, and then for the final upgrade of the build, I planned on using Journey Tattoos of Makanui to reroll a keystone and pathing past into Pain attunement, but these tattoos have gone from 4 divines to 13 divines over the last few days. There's around 49 keystone passives in the game, and there's only one that I want, meaning it's going to cost me around 637 divines on average to hit, assuming that the prices don't keep climbing. 30% more damage is insane, but I am not. So I'm just going to need all of you guys to pretend that I'm doing 30% more damage than what I'm actually doing. Deal? Okay, great. But just before we do some Uber bosses, I'm going to spec out of Toad Pact. The AoE was kind of nice, and the prod speed was okay, but it's really not that great to be honest. Not when I could have Vile Imprecations for 10% more damage to nearby enemies and an additional curse, allowing me to self-cast Despair on top of my Mark on Hit Assassin's Mark setup. Let's take a quick dive into POB so you can see the final numbers of this build. So, as you can see, we are extremely tanky thanks to the Lucky Block. Our physical max hit is the only real defensive weakness here, but we're blocking pretty much every hit anyway. Now, we're currently showing us having 22.5 million DPS, but that's because we're currently set to only hitting an enemy with 1 projectile, when Soulrend of the Spiral fires 5 projectiles. That's a bit better. The damage numbers are looking much nicer now, but remember, thanks to Nimis, all 5 of those projectiles are coming back and doing their full damage again, so we can set that number to 10 instead. And suddenly, we're at 222 million damage. That's an insane number. It isn't quite realistic though. This number is assuming that we're firing 5 cats with every trigger, and every one of those cats is hitting the enemy, travelling outwards, returning back, and hitting the enemy again. Now this is possible on very large enemies, but it's unrealistic for most situations. This is pretty much the best case scenario DPS, rather than the realistic number. Sadly, we can't really know what is realistic since our projectiles fire out in random directions and all enemies are different sizes. Either way, this is a great example of what damage is possible. So, let's finally test out this absolute kitten cannon unit of a build. First up is the Uber Elder for some tank testing. We find out that we're easily able to tank the Elder's AoE circle, the Elder's tentacle slams, and even the Uber Shaper's beam for a few seconds. And then we kill them off with no issue. Huh, I wonder how long I had Purity of Elements turned off for. Next up's the Uber Cortex, and I mean, this boss is already a bit of a joke under normal circumstances, but now I can pretty much just hold down right click and go AFK and it just dies in front of me. There's really not much else to say about Uber Cortex other than GG, who's next? Now this one should be a real fight, the Uber Incarnation of Dread. Uber Dread ramps up in difficulty far more than most other Uber fights. Normally in the intermission phases, he spawns 2 roses for you to pick up and deliver to him, but in Uber mode, he spawns both the Incarnation of Fear and Neglect, each holding one of these roses. Your task is to kill them both off so that you can progress. This seems to be absolutely no problem for the kittens. I nuke the other 2 incarnations down pretty fast all things considered, and I'm completely ignoring all other mechanics of the fight. I can literally just tank everything that hits me while I kill them. And just remember, this is with 30% less damage than I'm meant to have. Absolutely insane. Funny story. While editing, I noticed something. All of my skills are linked to life tap since I have no mana to cast them. Well, all except Assassin's Mark. It would seem I forgot to link that one to life tap, so from the point I swapped out of blood magic, right up until I finished recording, I was never actually cursing anything with Assassin's Mark. Whoopsie. Either way, Uber Dread goes down without ever really even putting up a fight. Maybe the Uber Eater of Worlds can give me a challenge? Nope, not at all. That's Uber Eats down. Onto the Searing Exarch. The Searing Exarch starts off easy enough, but then it quickly highlights one of the weaknesses of this build. Ground damage over time effects. He covers his arena in them and he loves to stand in them, and I need to melee him to be able to do any damage. Ground effects like this cannot be blocked and will degen me pretty fast since my life recharge doesn't work against them. It's the biggest weakness of this build by far and is massively highlighted in a fight like this, but we do still manage to get him down regardless. The Uber Maven also does a great job of exploiting this weakness. Her dodge this lasers turn off all forms of life recovery. In most builds, this is fine, but we need our life to carry on doing damage, so if this hits us, we have to just AFK for 10 seconds. Of course, the tactic here is to just dodge the lasers, but it still does a good job of exploiting that one weakness. And so, that's the 1 billion cats build, in all of its strengths and weaknesses. It was a really cool build and a great learning experience. I've never done a build like this before, and it was a really interesting mechanic to play around with, although a really awkward one at times. Especially in the early stages, where I was doing more damage to bosses' patience than I was to their health bar. And it certainly didn't help that I did this during an event, where making money was way more difficult than normal and most items were priced insanely higher due to how few of them existed, but we got there, and the cats were plentiful. So, would I recommend this build? For new players, probably not. There's way too many calculations that you need to get right with the life recovery sustain and the cast on crit breakpoints, and this is absolutely not the kind of build you should be starting from scratch. It's an endgame build you can infinitely throw money at to get infinitely stronger. Just look at Sebk's video for example, and he didn't have all the insanely powerful tattoos that we had in this event. So if you're an experienced player with a ton of money to invest, I'd say give it a go, although I wouldn't suggest doing Soulrend as your source of damage. I chose it because, well, cats obviously, but Chaos skills naturally have such terrible damage scaling. You could easily double the damage of this build just by picking up a different skill gem. So, that was the crazy cat lady build, guys. I really hope you enjoyed watching. Huge thanks to Ghost for helping me with designing this build. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the journey, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.